c'est augmenter de façon quantitative les arbres mères. Ce que nous appelons arbres mères, c'est ces arbres d'anacarde qui peuvent permettre en réalité d'offrir des greffons aux pépiniéristes afin quand même d'offrir aux producteurs des plants greffés. Le deuxième axe d'intervention, c'est ces semences lax qui permet d'installer 2 vergers de production de semences polyclonales, un verger de 12 hectares à Orgui dans la commune de Savert et un verger de 12 hectares à Ina dans la commune de Bembereke. Le troisième axe d'intervention de Bénin Cashew en termes d'appui, c'est le renforcement des capacités. Et à ce titre, Technoserve a pris l'engagement d'accompagner 7 jeunes et cadres au niveau du ministère de l'Agriculture pour les envoyer en formation.
Technoserve nous a appuyés pour un voyage en Tanzanie. Et là, nous avons découvert de très merveilleuses manières de travail, telles que le greffage sur bois mou. Nous avons aussi reçu les techniques de fabrication de bokashi. Le bokashi, c'est un engrais organique. Bénin Cashew Technoserve a financé le voyage des experts d'autres pays qui sont venus nous apprendre cette technique de fabrication de bokashi.
L'Institut national de recherche agricole du Bénin a certaines faiblesses que la coopération avec Technoserve est en train de combler en termes d'infrastructures de conservation de ce matériel, en termes de ressources humaines capables de gérer convenablement ce patrimoine génétique. Nous avons déjà, avec l'appui de Technoserve, identifié des arbres élites performants d'anacardier dont nous allons utiliser les potentiels pour dupliquer et avoir beaucoup d'autres matériels. Nous avons aussi avec Technoserve le contact avec des pays comme la Tanzanie et le Mozambique qui ont de l'expérience en matière de production de cajou. Et donc, on pourrait bien les rattraper.
L'importance de l'installation de ce verger est d'augmenter la quantité de matériel végétal de qualité pour permettre aux producteurs d'avoir un rendement plus élevé à l'hectare.
Nous avons aujourd'hui 3 conseillers d'entreprise qui encadrent la cinquantaine de pépiniéristes dûment identifiés, sélectionnés avec l'appui du gouvernement pour que cette production repose sur des techniques managériales, entrepreneuriales qui permettent à ces pépiniéristes de jouer un rôle prépondérant dans l'atteinte de l'objectif de l'augmentation de la production de notre cajou.
Le rôle du pépiniériste, nous sommes les gardiens du matériel végétal, qui est un patrimoine pour notre pays. Donc, sans le pépiniériste, nos matériels végétal performants vont disparaître. Ce que Bénin Cashew a fait pour moi, permettez-moi de le dire, ils m'ont beaucoup appuyé, surtout la formation des femmes. Donc, on a eu à former 10 personnes, dont 9 femmes et un homme. Bénin Cashew est comme la levure dans la farine de blé qui fait lever le pain. J'ai pu avoir beaucoup de choses. Je me suis acheté un domaine où je suis en train de construire une maison familiale actuellement. Et à côté, j'ai prévu une pépinière. Avant Bénin Cashew, je produis 5000 plants. Je suis aujourd'hui à au moins 12 000 plants. Je vois un futur radieux devant moi.
actuelle de crise sanitaire mondiale liée à la pandémie de la COVID-19, il s'avère fondamental de relever la participation des femmes dans tous les maillons de la production, d'encourager et de renforcer leur leadership et leur résilience pour favoriser leur autonomisation, surtout dans le domaine économique. TechnoServe Bénin et l'Agence territoriale de développement agricole Pôle 4 s'inscrivent activement dans cette dynamique. À cet effet, le 15 et 16 octobre 2020, s'est tenue dans la salle de conférence de l'ATDA Pôle 4 à Parakou une cérémonie de célébration de la Journée internationale de la femme rurale édition 2020. Cette journée a pour objectif de définir les modalités de mise en œuvre d'une stratégie de renforcement du leadership et d'une résilience plus accrue des femmes dans les différentes activités de développement socio-économique.
Dans la plupart des décisions, ces femmes-là ne bénéficient pas des avantages qui sont liés au développement économique de chaque pays. Donc, pour les valoriser davantage, la communauté internationale a dédié la journée du 15 octobre pour les célébrer. Comme nous sommes en partenariat avec des projets, programmes, ils ont décidé de nous accompagner pour pouvoir célébrer l'événement au niveau local. Ces femmes-là sont aussi présentes surtout au niveau du maillon transformation. C'est pourquoi nous leur avons demandé de ne pas venir seulement pour écouter les discours, mais qu'elles viennent avec leur chef-d'œuvre pour qu'on puisse voir ce qu'elles font et les gens vont aussi profiter pour se ravitailler.
En effet, dans sa stratégie de renforcement des capacités des acteurs de la filière cajou, TechnoServe, à travers Bénin Cajou, fournit des assistances techniques spécifiques et appropriées à la satisfaction des besoins des partenaires du public et du privé afin de promouvoir la production des noix brutes d'anacarde, le développement des chaînes de valeur et l'amélioration des revenus, notamment ceux des femmes.
Les braves femmes rurales sont effectivement à l'honneur aujourd'hui. Nous les félicitons et nous les exhortons à mettre leur résilience au service de nos communautés, surtout en cette période de pandémie. Et nous voulons les rassurer du soutien de TechnoServe pour une plus grande intégration du genre dans les chaînes de valeur de la filière anacarde.
Rappelons qu'au cours de cette messe agricole et rurale de haute facture, diverses autorités ont accompagné l'ATDA et TechnoServe à accélérer les meilleures innovations des produits dérivés du cajou et renforcer les aptitudes des femmes leaders et résilientes dans la filière cajou. Aussi faut-il le souligner, l'ambiance a été motivante et festive, marquée par 2 temps forts, portant notamment sur les réflexions et les partages d'expériences sur la résilience des femmes dans la chaîne de valeur anacarde et l'exposition vente des meilleures innovations réussies en faveur des femmes dans le développement socio-économique.
C'est grâce à Bénin Cajou que ça a été organisé dans le Nord, précisément à Parakou, et ça a permis aux femmes des 2 Nord de participer. Je veux dire à Takora, Donga, Bongo, Albori, Zoukoline, le centre aussi. Voilà pourquoi je tiens à remercier très sincèrement Bénin Cajou. Et cette séance aujourd'hui nous permet, elle nous a permis de partager les expériences des autres femmes. C'est déjà un plus pour nous. Et pour nous qui sommes arrivés, je nous demande à notre retour de passer l'information à celles qui ne sont pas venues, pour qu'elles puissent aussi être informées de ce que nous sommes venus faire. C'est ce qui manque souvent. Et ça fait que les informations, nous les gardons et les autres n'ont plus d'informations aussi. Ça ne permet pas un développement du groupe. Donc je nous demande de souvent communiquer, de partager l'information avec les autres femmes aussi de nos groupes.
Notons que dans la vision de travailler pour une véritable accélération et intégration de la filière cajou au Bénin, avec une part conséquente pour les femmes, l'intégration du genre constitue l'un des principaux axes d'intervention de TechnoServe via le projet Bénin Cajou.
Le projet Bénin Cajou a inscrit dans ses priorités, à compter de l'année 2019, des activités pour la sensibilisation des acteurs en vue d'une meilleure prise en compte de l'intégration du genre dans les différents maillons de la production. C'est à ce avoir milité en amont par un plaidoyer auprès de la FENAPAB pour l'amendement des textes en faveur d'une plus grande intégration du genre, Béné Cashew a soutenu en aval le processus de renouvellement des organes de gestion de la FENAPAB qui s'est achevé le 23 septembre. « 2019 avec l'élection à sa tête d'une femme, Madame Saadatou Atta Kakayachi, en tant que présidente du conseil d'administration.
Après mon élection à la FENAPAB, les impressions sont bonnes. Surtout être à la tête d'une fédération nationale des producteurs d'anacarde du Bénin. Les points clés de mes actions sont relatifs à la recherche des partenaires pour améliorer la qualité de nos activités, développer le plaidoyer à l'endroit de l'État pour qu'il nous accompagne.
Mariée et mère de 3 enfants, Madame Saadatou est propriétaire de 5 plantations d'anacardiers de 7 hectares et demi à Pénésoulou dans la commune de Bassila, à 372 km de Cotonou. Entrée dans la production du cajou depuis 1998 et précédemment chef quartier, cette mère dévouée gère en subsidiaire son restaurant, son commerce de savon et mène des œuvres sociales en faveur des orphelins de son arrondissement. Brave et vaillante, elle exhorte son équipe et les femmes dans la filière cajou à se battre pour pousser loin la filière.
Pour réussir ma mission, c'est un engagement efficace de l'équipe. Ensuite aussi, il y a la disponibilité, que toutes les femmes adhèrent aux coopératives de leur localité, entretenir bien les champs disponibles, celles qui n'en ont pas encore n'ont qu'à produire et surtout faire la vente groupée.
Le directeur général de la Fédération nationale des producteurs d'anacarde du Bénin, FENAPAB, explique ici les raisons qui ont soutenu cette action d'éclat manifestée par l'élection d'une femme à la présidence du conseil d'administration de la FENAPAB.
Depuis la création de la FENAPAB en 2006, elle a été gérée par les hommes. Déjà en septembre 2019, les hommes et les femmes ont souhaité mettre maintenant les femmes à la tête de cette organisation pour gérer ces 2 organes-là, conseil d'administration et conseil de surveillance.
La commune de Bassila n'est pas restée en marge de ce processus car la mairie s'est illustrée récemment dans des actes forts en faveur des femmes pour la filière cajou.
Il faut dire que c'est un honneur pour nous et une fierté de savoir que une dame de ma commune, à la personne de Madame Atta Kakayachi Sada, a été élue. C'est en même temps un défi pour nous.
Avec ce coup d'éclat, Madame Atta, présidente de la FENAPAB, élue pour 3 ans depuis le 23 septembre 2019, expose ici succinctement un plan de sa vision pour la filière cajou qui ne peut évidemment pas se réaliser sans le précieux concours des autorités en charge de l'agriculture au Bénin.
Actuellement, nous sommes à 130 000 tonnes. Mon souhait est qu'on fasse le double, sinon même pourquoi pas le triple du tonnage antérieur et ensuite qu'on puisse transformer plus de la moitié de ces produits au niveau local chez nous pour le plein essor de cette filière. Les activités à mener, c'est de continuer le plaidoyer envers le public, les privés, dans le renforcement.
Cashew is an increasingly important crop for the countries in West Africa. For Benin, it's their second most valuable export. And we saw this big potential to grow and increase more.
Le cajou arrive en seconde place après le coton. À 110 000, 120 000 tonnes, en 2 ans, nous sommes passés à 120, 130, 140 000 tonnes. L'objectif du gouvernement, c'est d'aller à 300 000 tonnes à la fin du quinquennat.
Cashew me permet de vivre. Au moment où je n'avais pas suivi avec Cashew Bénin, les 2 hectares font 5 sacs. Et maintenant, avec Cashew Bénin, je vends 15 sacs cette année. Le projet nous a appris beaucoup de choses.
Il a formé 10 personnes, dont 9 femmes et 1 homme.
Après mon élection à la FENAPAB, les impressions sont bonnes. Surtout être à la tête d'une fédération nationale des producteurs d'anacarde du Bénin. Les points clés de mes actions sont relatifs à la recherche des partenaires pour améliorer la qualité de nos activités, développer le plaidoyer à l'endroit de l'État pour qu'il nous accompagne.
Benin Cashew is an innovative program aimed at strengthening and growing the Beninese cashew sector. Its goal is to create a more productive, competitive, sustainable, and inclusive economic growth engine for the people of Benin. It's being funded by the USDA and is being implemented by TechnoServe and our partners at CRS. Over 8 years, Benin Cashew will increase the yields and incomes of more than 49,000 smallholder farmers, triple Benin's domestic processing capacity, create more than 3,400 jobs, most of which will be held by women, and will position the entire sector for continued growth long after the project ends.
TechnoServe travaille avec des hommes et des femmes pour bâtir des fermes et des entreprises compétitives qui contribuent à la réduction de la pauvreté, à l'augmentation de la résilience des bénéficiaires et de leur communauté. Nous restons convaincus que la participation pleine et entière des femmes et des filles permet de maximiser la croissance économique inclusive pour un développement généralisé. Au sein de la production agricole et notamment dans la filière cajou, bien que présentes, les femmes sont confrontées à des difficultés en ce qui concerne l'accès aux facteurs de production, notamment la terre, les ressources financières, la technologie et les formations. Au début du projet Benin Cashew, la participation des femmes était d'environ 20,57%. À fin décembre 2020, ce taux est passé à 34,67% au sein de la production et à 39% au sein du projet. L'objectif étant d'atteindre au moins 40% de participation des femmes. Pour atteindre ce résultat, nous avons mis en place un dispositif institutionnel avec tous les partenaires du projet pour intégrer le genre au sein de toutes les activités de ce projet. Nous avons un dispositif basé sur des points focaux genre qui ont reçu des formations sur différentes techniques, différentes thématiques. Nous avons mené aussi un plaidoyer pour la modification des tests statutaires des fêtières des producteurs de cajou afin d'alléger les conditions d'accès des femmes aux coopératives. Et nous avons pu avoir une femme présidente du conseil d'administration de la fêtière des producteurs d'anacarde et une femme présidente du conseil de surveillance de cette même organisation, ce qui est une première au Bénin au sein de la filière anacarde.
Après mon élection à la FENAPAB, les impressions sont bonnes, surtout être à la tête d'une fédération nationale des producteurs d'anacarde du Bénin. Les points clés de mes actions sont relatifs à la recherche des partenaires pour améliorer la qualité de nos activités, développer le plaidoyer à l'endroit de l'État pour qu'il nous accompagne.
J'ai constaté qu'avec cette formation, la femme a un grand rôle à jouer pour l'émancipation et la prospérité, bien partagée qu'à l'intérieur, qu'à l'extérieur, au sein du foyer. Grâce à cette même formation, la population, mais la communauté a un regard craintif en nous. Ils nous copient, ils voient la manière dont nous vivons avec mon épouse. Grâce à cette formation, nous avons pu réaliser beaucoup de choses.
Cette formation que nous avons eue sur le champ nous a réveillés par rapport à la femme, parce que dans le maillon de production, on a constaté que les femmes n'ont pas assez à la tête, donc du coup, elles sont marginalisées. Donc sur le terrain, nous voyons à ce que les femmes soient prises en compte. Et comme le projet le recommande 40% de femmes, il faut dire que ce n'est pas facile. 40% des femmes dans tout ce que nous faisons, on doit pouvoir toucher au moins 40% de femmes.
Mea was founded in 1993 and listed on the air share market in 2012. Mea is China's leading high-tech enterprise focusing on the R&D and manufacturing of optotronic intelligent identification equipment. Mea is committed to applying intelligent identification technology to cashew sorting and processing by developing a full range of cashew color sorters, such as CF series, KM series, KF series, KFS3 series, K4 series, KS4 series, CG.A series, M series, XS series, XM series, XL series, etc. The whole scene sorting solution can be provided to raw cashew separation, whole cashew separation, split separation, broken pieces separation, tester separation, scorched separation, medium spot separation, shell separation, foreign material separation, and so on. Mea brand new cashew color sorter, equipped with AI deep learning technology based on massive cashew sorting data, can quickly build and iterate deep learning sorting models to break the problems of micro-color difference, mold and spores, which are difficult to solve with traditional color sorters, significantly improving the sorting efficiency and impurities such as single spot, multiple spot, micro-color difference, skin, insect spots, mold and wrinkled skin of cashew kernels. In addition, based on engineering design and intelligent manufacturing, the structure of the whole machine is highly standardized and modularized, which greatly enhance the stability and reliability. Mea is dedicated to creating more value for cashew processors.
Je m'appelle Sinagbero Kalilakou. J'ai 28 ans. Je suis née à Ina, dans la commune de Bembereke. Je suis mariée et nous avons 2 enfants. Quand je me réveille, je fais d'abord mes travaux domestiques. Je balaie, la foule, la chambre, je lave mes bols. Je prépare le petit déjeuner pour la famille et je viens travailler en pépinière. C'est en 2019 que j'ai commencé à collaborer avec le projet Benekadjo. Quand j'ai connu le projet Benekadjo, on est rentré dans le système de professionnalisation. Et dans ce système, à cette date, nous avons déjà reçu 5 modules de formation. En plus de la pépinière d'anacardier, nous faisons la pépinière des manguis et des autres essences forestières. Après ça, nous faisons les cultures vivrières telles que le soja, l'arachide, le niébé. En dehors de ça, nous faisons le levage. On fait le levage des porcs et le levage des volailles. Pendant la pandémie du Covid-19, nous n'avons pas connu de difficultés par rapport à la main-d'œuvre. La main-d'œuvre était toujours disponible. La pandémie du Covid-19 a engendré des impacts dans notre entreprise parce qu'il y a eu la baisse du prix d'achat des produits. Benekadjo nous a aidés. parce qu'on continuait pas suivre les formations sur la professionnalisation et à chaque formation, on recevait la réponse sur le COVID-19. Après ce programme de professionnalisation qui est toujours en cours, on a appris à faire le bokashi. Le bokashi nous permet d'augmenter la production. Nous avons effectué un voyage en Tanzanie où on a appris beaucoup de choses sur l'agronomie de l'anacardier. Mes ambitions, c'est d'abord être compté parmi les plus grands pépiniéristes du Bénin. Aller à une production de 50 000 plants. Bon, je veux avoir également un site moderne. Nous souhaitons que Bénin Cashew continue par nous appuyer surtout sur les aspects techniques de la production. Bon, Bénin Cashew nous a apporté beaucoup de choses, beaucoup de connaissances. Je remercie sincèrement le projet Bénin Cashew pour ses apports à mon niveau et de ne pas cesser de continuer toujours car on ne finit jamais d'apprendre.
En relation avec l'objectif du gouvernement d'augmenter la production, qui aujourd'hui est de l'ordre de 130 000 tonnes à 300 000 tonnes d'ici les 5 prochaines années, il s'est avéré nécessaire de disposer d'un matériel végétal performant de plantation, ce qui a amené le projet Bénin Cashew à accompagner la production de ce matériel végétal performant à travers d'abord les acteurs qui sont les pépiniéristes, dont la structuration a été accompagnée, et ensuite maintenant la recherche qui aujourd'hui fait l'objet d'un accompagnement à travers l'installation de 2 sites conçus qui vont abriter les vergers de production de semences polyclonales qui puissent permettre d'atteindre l'objectif d'augmentation de la production de plants d'anacardier.
En termes d'action, Technoserve à travers Bénin Cashew a 3 axes. Le premier axe, c'est augmenter de façon quantitative les arbres mères. Ce que nous appelons arbres mères, c'est ces arbres d'anacarde qui peuvent permettre en réalité d'offrir des greffons aux pépiniéristes afin quand même d'offrir aux producteurs des plants greffés. Le deuxième axe d'intervention, c'est ces semences lax qui permet d'installer 2 vergers de production de semences polyclonales, un verger de 12 hectares à Ogui dans la commune de Savé et un verger de 12 hectares à Ina dans la commune de Bembereke. Le troisième axe d'intervention de Bénin Cashew en termes d'appui, c'est le renforcement des capacités. Et à ce titre, Technoserve a pris l'engagement d'accompagner 7 jeunes et cadres au niveau du ministère de l'Agriculture pour les envoyer en formation.
Technoserve nous a appuyés pour un voyage en Tanzanie. Et là, nous avons découvert de très merveilleuses manières de travail, telles que le greffage sur bois mou. Nous avons aussi reçu les techniques de fabrication de bokashi. Le bokashi, c'est un engrais organique. Bénin Cashew Technoserve a financé le voyage des experts d'autres pays qui sont venus nous apprendre cette technique de fabrication de bokashi.
L'Institut national de recherche agricole du Bénin a certaines faiblesses que la coopération avec Technoserve est en train de combler en termes d'infrastructures de conservation de ce matériel, en termes de ressources humaines capables de gérer convenablement ce patrimoine génétique. Nous avons déjà, avec l'appui de Technoserve, identifié des arbres élites performants d'anacardier dont nous allons utiliser les potentiels pour dupliquer et avoir beaucoup d'autres matériels. Nous avons aussi avec Technoserve le contact avec des pays comme la Tanzanie, le Mozambique qui ont de l'expérience en matière de production de cajou et donc on pourrait bien les rattraper.
L'importance de l'installation de ce verger est d'augmenter la quantité de matériel végétal de qualité pour permettre aux producteurs d'avoir un rendement plus élevé à l'hectare.
Nous avons aujourd'hui 3 conseillers d'entreprise qui encadrent la cinquantaine de pépiniéristes dûment identifiés, sélectionnés avec l'appui du gouvernement pour que cette production repose sur des techniques managériales, entrepreneuriales qui permettent à ces pépiniéristes de jouer un rôle prépondérant dans l'atteinte de l'objectif de l'augmentation de la production de notre cajou.
Le rôle du pépiniériste, nous sommes les gardiens du matériel végétal, qui est un patrimoine pour notre pays. Donc sans le pépiniériste, nos matériels végétal performants vont disparaître. Ce que Bénin Cashew a fait pour moi, permettez-moi de le dire, ils m'ont beaucoup appuyé, surtout la formation des femmes. Donc on a eu à former 10 personnes, dont 9 femmes et un homme. Bénin Cashew est comme la levure dans la farine de blé qui fait lever le pain. J'ai pu avoir beaucoup de choses. Je me suis acheté un domaine où je suis en train de construire une maison familiale actuellement. Et à côté, j'ai prévu une pépinière. Avant Bénin Cashew, je produis 5000 plants. Je suis aujourd'hui à au moins 12 000 plants. Je vois un futur radieux devant moi.
contexte actuel de crise sanitaire mondiale liée à la pandémie de la Covid-19, il s'avère fondamental de relever la participation des femmes dans tous les maillons de la production, d'encourager et de renforcer leur leadership et leur résilience pour favoriser leur autonomisation, surtout dans le domaine économique. TechnoServe Bénin et l'Agence territoriale de développement agricole Pôle 4 s'inscrivent activement dans cette dynamique. À cet effet, le 15 et 16 octobre 2020, s'est tenue dans la salle de conférence de l'ATDA Pôle 4 à Parakou une cérémonie de célébration de la Journée internationale de la femme rurale édition 2020. Cette journée a pour objectif de définir les modalités de mise en œuvre d'une stratégie de renforcement du leadership et d'une résilience plus accrue des femmes dans les différentes activités de développement socio-économique.
Dans la plupart des décisions, ces femmes-là ne bénéficient pas des avantages qui sont liés au développement économique de chaque pays. Donc, pour les valoriser davantage, la communauté internationale a dédié la journée du 15 octobre pour les célébrer. Comme nous sommes en partenariat avec des programmes, ils ont décidé de nous accompagner pour pouvoir célébrer l'événement au niveau local. Ces femmes-là sont aussi présentes surtout au niveau du maillon transformation. C'est pourquoi nous leur avons demandé de ne pas venir seulement pour écouter les discours, mais qu'elles viennent avec leur chef-d'œuvre pour qu'on puisse voir ce qu'elles font et les gens vont aussi profiter pour se ravitailler.
En effet, dans sa stratégie de renforcement des capacités des acteurs de la filière cajou, TechnoServe, à travers Bénin Cajou, fournit des assistances techniques spécifiques et appropriées à la satisfaction des besoins des partenaires du public et du privé afin de promouvoir la production des noix brutes d'anacarde, le développement des chaînes de valeur et l'amélioration des revenus, notamment ceux des femmes.
Les braves femmes rurales sont effectivement à l'honneur aujourd'hui. Nous les félicitons et nous les exhortons à mettre leur résilience au service de nos communautés, surtout en cette période de pandémie. Et nous voulons les rassurer du soutien de TechnoServe pour une plus grande intégration du genre dans les chaînes de valeur de la filière anacarde.
Rappelons qu'au cours de cette messe agricole et rurale de haute facture, diverses autorités ont accompagné la TDA et TechnoServe à accélérer les meilleures innovations des produits dérivés du cajou et renforcer les aptitudes des femmes leaders et résilientes dans la filière cajou. Aussi faut-il le souligner, l'ambiance a été motivante et festive, marquée par 2 temps forts, portant notamment sur les réflexions et les partages d'expériences sur la résilience des femmes dans la chaîne de valeur anacarde et l'exposition vente des meilleures innovations réussies en faveur des femmes dans le développement socio-économique.
C'est grâce à Bénin Cajou que ça a été organisé dans le Nord, précisément à Parakou. Et ça a permis aux femmes des 2 Nord de participer. Je veux dire à Takora Donga, Bongo, Albori, Zoukoli, le centre aussi. Voilà pourquoi je tiens à remercier très sincèrement Bénin Cajou. Et cette séance aujourd'hui nous permet, elle nous a permis de partager les
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another session of the ACA Global Market Encounter with Patrick. On behalf of the management and board of the African Cashew Alliance, I express our sincere gratitude to our partners and sponsors who have continually made it possible for us to bring this session. Just before we move into today's agenda, please note that this session will be held in English with a simultaneous French interpretation. To access this service, please locate the globe icon on your screen. Select a preferred language and mute the original sound. Should you have any question or need for clarification as the presentation is ongoing, please use the Q&A box also located on your screen. And without wasting much time, join me welcome Jim Fitzpatrick. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Blessing. How are you?
I'm doing well, Jim. And you?
Yeah, pretty good, thank you. So let me just make sure you can see the title slide.
Yes, I see your title slide.
All right. Thanks, Blessing. Let's go. So today we're going to talk about the markets as we always do, and we're going to talk about the prospects in East Africa for the coming season. So I'm very happy to welcome our two guests. Firstly from Tanzania, Francis Alfred, the Director General of the Cashew Board of Tanzania. And from Mozambique, Lucia Antonio, the Head of Department Trade and Agri-Industry at the IAM, the Cashew Institute of Mozambique. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to make a short presentation. Then we're going to have a discussion with Francis Alfred on the situation in Tanzania for the coming season. I'll show you a couple of pieces of information he's shared with us on the investment code. And then Lucia Antonio will make a presentation on the situation in Mozambique and the prospects for the coming season. And then I hope you will join us with some questions and some comments on what you've heard, or really on anything else related to the cashew sector. So let's begin. So we'll start today, as we usually do, we'll have a look at the market, and I'll start with cashew kernels. There hasn't been a great deal of change over the past couple of weeks since we were together last. The market's been a little bit quieter than it had been in the previous 2 weeks. I'm really talking there about the international kernels market, mainly sales from Vietnam. Demand's steady, but there hasn't really been the kind of follow through that sometimes we've seen in the past. Trade statistics remain really strong, just about everywhere. I was looking at India's kernels exports. India isn't a huge exporter of kernels anymore, but even India's kernels exports are up 4% this year now by the end of August. About 30,000 tons exported over the first 8 months of the year. So that looks really positive, more of that later. Prices, though, are not moving, and I suppose that's the real issue for processors now, and I suppose in a way for buyers of kernels too. We are seeing this wider range. Still, some importers, particularly in the US, are offering really competitive prices into their market. And we're just not seeing any movement on kernels prices after that firming that we saw in the early part of September. So where are we on prices? Let's remind ourselves. As you can see, the prices are still, although a little bit firmer, there's no real sign of volatility. We've seen a very stable pattern over the past few weeks. The gap from the lower end to the higher end, so from the small processors for prompt positions, maybe with lower food safety certifications, the gap from those guys to the big processors forward positions has widened a little bit. And the gap between the holes and the brokens has got a little bit wider. Not really noticeable on the chart, but it has gotten a little bit wider. So I think that sometimes we can take those two factors as indications that some price change might be ahead. But right now, we're not seeing anything to suggest that it's going to happen today or tomorrow or next week or even this month. When we look at the overall positioning of prices, we're still at or around the 2-year lows. Now, I know that there were prices below the current levels traded, but I try to work off the better processors on a 3-month forward position to try and give us a constant when we measure where price is. So that means we are at about the 2-year lows. We're 9% below the 2-year average. That's quite significant. And we're 19% below the 2-year high. And that's also quite significant. So what does it mean? Well, it certainly means that most contracts are concluded above today's market, certainly any contract that was done forward. But there would be many contracts done in the last weeks and in the spring that would be in or around about today's prices. And that can be significant in the future, especially if we start to see volatility in the cashew price. It also means that buyers can buy at very attractive prices. By any measure, the current cashew prices are really, really attractive. Can a buyer buy them and resell them and make a profit? Probably. Is it likely that the price 6 months from now will be higher? Probably. Are these prices historically at levels that would have in the past justified making a purchase? Certainly. But buyers may not see a reason to make a move just yet. And I think that's part of the reason that we're going to talk about as to why prices haven't moved so far. So let's have a look at some of the trade figures, some of the stats, and some of the talk on the market. We start in Vietnam. So when we're talking about international trade in cashew kernels, Vietnam is always the place to start. In 2022, Vietnam supplied about 57% of the internationally traded cashew kernels. It supplied 89% of the United States imports and 76% of the European Union imports. And those two markets come second and third in the world for consumption of cashews after India. So looking at Vietnam's exports so far, it's record-breaking performance. That's all we can say. As at the end of September, the figure exceeds any other 9-month period in the history of the Vietnamese cashew industry. So a new record there. And the interesting thing, or one of the interesting things, is that it's quite positive right across all of the destination markets. So we can see at the lower end of the scale, the shipments. So we're talking now the increase in shipments from Vietnam in 2023 over the figures for the same period last year, 2022. So we can see that the US and Canada combined are up 8%, Europe is up 7%, and then we get into some fairly remarkable numbers. Shipments to the top 5 importers in the Middle East are up 35%, and to China, in what is becoming more and more significant in terms of demand, particularly for Vietnam, shipments to China are up 39% on where they were this time last year. Rest of Asia really moving into the cashew sphere. And we have to say that the future of demand is probably in Asia. And when we look at the top 11 countries in Asia outside of China, we see 17% growth. So every month since last March has been a new record for export shipments from Vietnam. And that points to a new record this year. That's not something that anyone would have expected. We might have expected a recovery in shipments and exports this year compared to last year. Bear in mind, last year, shipments were good in the first half of the year, but particularly to the Western countries in the second half, they literally fell off the chart. July, August onwards, really strongly down. We expected a recovery this year. We've seen that recovery. We didn't quite expect the kind of increase in exports to Asian countries that we've seen over the first 9 months of this year. And that's really positive for the market generally. Let's have a look at some of the countries. So we'll just take a kind of big picture approach here, and we'll have a look at some of the highlights of demand so far this year in the various countries. So let's start in Asia. India. Now, outside India, we see Indian demand expressed as imports of raw cashew nuts. When I talk about consumption in India, I'm not talking about RCN imports. I will talk about those shortly. we're talking about consumption in the country. Big country, huge consumer, and we're seeing quite strong consumption. That is always just based on reports, conversations, what they call anecdotal evidence. We don't have statistical evidence on India, but we will be able to calculate as we get to the end of the year the net disappearance. So very strong so far in India. China, well, as I've said, by the end of August, China had imported as much as it has imported in all of 2022. And that's really good news for business generally. In Japan, shipments are up 30% from Vietnam, which is also very encouraging. And I checked shipments from India, and shipments from India are not especially down to Japan. So it is a net increase. It's not just a replacement of cargo that was previously coming from somewhere else. Just took Australia as an example of another Asian country. Australian shipments from Vietnam up by 7% already this year. So there could be seasonal factors in some of this. There could also be seasonal factors in the Middle East, where we've said shipments are up by 30% from Vietnam. But generally speaking, it does look extremely positive in the Asian markets. If we look in Europe, might say it's a little bit less positive, but this is much more in line with what we expected this year for the European market. So overall, official figures to the end of July show imports up by about 3% for the European Union and the UK combined. You have to be careful when you look at import figures in Europe, because it also includes trade between European countries, and that has to be excluded. So if you come up with a bigger number, you might just find some of it's intra-Europe trade. So this is the figure for imports from outside, and it's up 3%. But if we look at shipments, so now we're talking about what's been shipped from Vietnam and may not be in the import figures in Europe so far. But shipments to Germany up 15%, France up 17%, the UK up 15%, and the Netherlands, which would be the biggest importing destination as the receiving and redistribution country for most of the cashew kernels, that's up 6%. So the comment would be that shipments are running ahead of imports. That's a signal that the second half of the year will see an overall improvement, and it wouldn't be surprising if that import figure of plus 3% finished the year maybe at 5%, 6% up, based on the figures that we have right now. Looking at the African perspective, by the end of July, imports into the EU and UK had reached 70% of the 2022 total. So again, well ahead for Africa. There's growth there. Côte d'Ivoire in particular is growing in its shipments to the European market. Pretty positive news. North America. Well, there is a little bit of positive news, or more positive news coming in the last couple of months. July imports into the US were up by 25% on last year, and August by a similar figure. Now, we would have to say that July and August last year were quite disappointing. Let's look at shipments from Vietnam. So all shipments between January and September from Vietnam with North American destinations are 8% up. This is looking, again, quite positive, but certainly the US market is recovering or coming back to growth in demand a little bit slower than other markets. Overall imports for the year are still down 10%. That looks a lot better than it did 3 months ago when the figure was minus 17%. And I've started now to look more and more at the imports of processed cashews. So we're talking about roasted and salted cashews. We're talking about roasted cashews. We're talking about consumer packed cashews. That figure is about 20,000 tons so far this year, and that's about 5% up on last year. So we're seeing, generally speaking, across the world, very positive statistics for trade, much better than last year, and some of the figures are better than 2021. Asian figures generally better than 2021. Europe and the US, Canada still lagging a little bit on the 2021 figures and in the case of North America, still below last year, but all seems to be moving in a positive direction. So let's switch to raw cashew nuts for a moment and just see if we can get a snapshot picture of the situation across the world. Some of you will be very familiar with this. For others, it's not something they look at too regularly. So we are now, we've basically finished the West African season. The East African season is upon us. It's going to start with the auctions in Tanzania on Friday, and in November, the Mozambique season will open. So let's have a look at where we are as that comes upon us. First of all, in Vietnam, imports strong this year. Imports of raw cashew nuts very strong this year, up 40%. And that's despite a fall in imports from Cambodia. Exports, as I was saying, very strong. In the last month, the exports slightly exceeded imports, but not by much, which means that the stocks are slightly lower, but stocks are pretty good in Vietnam. I don't think there's any urgent need for Vietnamese buyers to procure raw cashew nuts from outside the country. If we look in India, again, imports are strong. The figures for the end of August, 868,000 tons of raw cashew nuts imported. Okay, that looks much lower than last year. That's about 200,000 tons less than the same time last year. But if we go back to 2021, or any other year on record, 2023 is higher. The only year that's higher than 2023 is last year. And don't forget, last year resulted in a big carry-in. So again, it seems to me that the stocks available, what's been imported, are pretty stable, pretty good in India. Not a huge urgency there. I'm pretty sure Indian buyers will need to come to East Africa eventually to buy some raw cashew nuts, but I wouldn't say they're under too much pressure at this moment in time. East Africa, crop outlook is good. I'm not going to talk about it. We're going to hear from our guests shortly on the crops and the situation in East Africa. West Africa, shipments are really, really strong this year. There are some balances around, probably Guinea-Bissau, for example, 30 to 40,000 tons as mentioned. But if we look at shipments from Côte d'Ivoire, if we look at Vietnam's import side, so this is what's arrived and been custom cleared in Vietnam, they're reporting 700,000 tons. India's reporting 142,000 tons. That's a total of 842,000 tons. So take that, add what's likely to be processed this year, and we're well into the Ivorian crop. And if we look at Ghana, we can see that Ghanaian exports this year are very strong too, 200,000 tons to India, more than that to Vietnam. So clearly, a lot of material is arriving from Ghana, probably into Vietnam and from Ghanaian ports, but it may not be Ghanaian raw cashew nuts. That is an issue that's authorities, both sides in Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire are well aware of. So I think when we can add some of those Ghanaian imports, especially into Vietnam, to the Ivorian figures, and that suggests that we are well on the way to the Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana crop, and probably other origins in the region included in those numbers, well ahead of the curve. Unlikely that we're going to see big stocks left in West Africa this year. Look at Nigeria, 233,000 tons reported by Vietnam as imported, 63,000 tons by India. Essentially, the crop is gone. Probably some material from Benin perhaps included in there, but certainly that crop is gone. And looking at those figures, you'd be relatively optimistic that by the end of the year, all of the stocks in West Africa will be gone. Brazil, we had the crop forecast. It hasn't changed. We mentioned it last week. Around 127,000 tons, a bit like 2021, not as good as 2022. So let's ask the question. If demand is improving, why are prices not moving up? Now I'm going to look at it from 2 points of view. From a buyer's point of view, from a cashew kernel's buyer's point of view, they might say, well, why should we act? Prices are still low. They haven't moved up. We're still seeing plenty of offers. There's no incentive for us to take any action right now. We'll do what we have to, but no more than that. They might also say that supply still easily meets demand. If we look at it in the matrix, supply-demand balance, they would probably be right on that. They might also say, well, you know, we're not really that certain about what's happening. Maybe the whole economic situation does look a little bit better. And here we might be talking about the United States in particular. But there is a lot of uncertainty. There's uncertainty about inflation. There's uncertainty about recession. And that would also apply to China. So that's going to hold buyers back, you might imagine. And finally, they might be saying, well, look, if the price does go up, it creates a lot of risk. And there might be a risk of defaults. So why would we want to upset this situation right now? Even if we weren't uncertain, even if we didn't feel supply was going to meet demand, and even if we didn't think prices are going to stay stable for the coming weeks. So it is a difficult puzzle from the buyer's point of view. And we should ask the question always, whose interest is it in that kernel's prices might rise? And it really isn't. I mean, outside of India, there really isn't a great deal of value for anyone in kernel's prices rising right now. Simply on the basis that processors generally tend not to speculate at this time of year. So they're not going to gain by prices going up. Consumers certainly aren't going to gain by prices going up. But in the longer term, processors might have a different perspective. So let's think about their perspective for a moment. So first thing for processors, and now we're looking really at Vietnamese processors. We might be looking at some of the smaller processors and we might be saying two things. First of all, they need to keep generating cash. So the only way to generate cash is to sell. If you have stock, it also allows you, if your credit is restricted, it allows you to regenerate new raw material so that you can sell again, so that you can stay in business and so that you can remain active. Now, if you didn't make forward sales, obviously you need to sell as well. And that is time bound. So as you process, you must sell. And maybe this is one of the reasons why we continually see a list of processors offering October, November, December, early 2024 shipping positions, simply because they need to sell, they need to stay in business, they need to keep turning over their business. And there's nothing wrong with that. Secondly, there's plenty of raw cashew nuts around. There's plenty of stock in Vietnam. So they know as they sell, they can replace, and as long as they can replace at some kind of a calculation, they're going to do that. And they might also say, and this is maybe where I would have a little bit of an argument with some of the processors in Vietnam, they might say that the market's been at low prices forever, for as long as we can remember. For 2 years now, we've been at low prices. And that's true. We have. Whether we need to be at low prices or not is entirely another matter. And I think to a certain extent, we might say that this is a little bit of a circular argument. We're at low prices because we're at low prices, and we're at low prices because we panicked about 2 years ago and got this completely wrong and drove prices much lower than they needed to be. But that's where it is now, and it is going to be difficult for this market to move off the current low prices. So we're around about the lows. These are around about the lows of 12 years, and it's been there for a long time. And it could be there for another while. But are they right? Are they right when they say that? Let's have a look at some of the factors. So first of all, there's no doubt supply does meet demand right now. Maybe not November, December, but certainly if we look at the whole year and we look at what's available, what's in stock, what's imported versus what's needed, yeah, supply meets demand. Secondly, for sure, prices have been low for a long time. Look at this chart. We're really looking back Well, we're really looking back quite a long time. And prices have been on a decline. It's now slowed or stopped. But would you rule out another period of stable prices around these current levels? It'd be a brave commentator who would do that. So, counter argument might be, well, look, supply does meet demand, but that's already factored into the prices. The market has already adjusted to the current supply-demand situation. Secondly, yeah, we agree. There are strong imports, meaning that the raw cashew nut stocks are mainly at destination. That's for sure. But that also means that they're in relatively strong hands. And we've seen over the last few weeks that raw cashew nut prices, although there hasn't been much trade, and although there is plenty of stock available in both the big processing countries, we haven't seen any real pressure on prices of raw cashew nuts. And there's not much chance of that happening in the coming weeks and probably in the coming months, because we're now at a time of year when there's much less harvesting going on than there would be in the period from March through to June. Third argument might be, well, supply could get worse. It's not going to get much better. We know that, not between now and the new crop in the Northern Hemisphere, but it could get worse. So there are risk factors. There's a lot of talk about El Nino. There's a lot of impact of El Nino. It is real. It is having a significant impact on weather right across the planet. Look at the monsoon in India. Look at some of the weather conditions in Europe. Look at some of the weather events in the United States. It is having an impact. It could have an impact in Southeast Asia on cashews. That would be the next time that we could see a major impact of El Nino, looking at flowering in particular in Cambodia and Vietnam. Later, it could influence India, but that wouldn't be until into the first quarter of next year. So supply can get worse. I think that's reasonable to say. We're going to hear shortly about the situation in East Africa, but it certainly looks pretty good this year from what I understand. Fourth factor, demand is improving. So we see counter arguments. We see, yeah, supply does meet demand. Yes, prices have been low for a long time. But some of those things are already factored into the market, and some of them are changing, and some of them are risk factors that we might see happen over the next couple of months. And that's what we need to watch. So we need to watch the situation as it develops in East Africa. We need to watch the situation in Southeast Asia, followed on then by the general Northern Hemisphere, India, and eventually West Africa crop development situation. We know about Brazil. We know roughly about East Africa. We're still asking the question, are they right when they say that there's no reason to move at the moment? Couple of factors. Inflation, certainly easing a little bit. Certainly it'll be lower in 2023 than 2022 and is forecast to be lower again in 2024. But the uncertainty persists. Buyers are unlikely in those conditions to take risks. So they'll buy what they need, but not much more than that. Inflation is stubborn. Inflation, particularly in countries like Germany, is hanging around longer than may be expected. Demand in those countries is also improving, and that's another little bit of a puzzle. So in the past, we used to say that in times of recession, demand for snack foods was strong. We didn't see that this time. We saw that the same amount of money was spent, and even more was spent on snack foods in Europe, for example, but the volume was significantly reduced. Costs were higher. Energy, transport, labor, packaging, all of these costs were higher. Raw material prices were lower. Cashew kernels were lower. But value sales stayed quite strong this year, but volumes we're down. So far, that appears to be changing when we look at the import figures. Second factor is from the processors' point of view, processors have been struggling. Profit margins have been poor for some time. I think that probably applies right across the sector. The relationship between raw cashew nut prices and kernels prices hasn't been ideal for processing, and it should. But on the other hand, we're likely to see competition between India and Vietnam for supply of raw cashew nuts. We're likely to see that continue. And that is one of the things that's holding up raw cashew nut prices. Just look at the growth in that trade. By August, India 868,000 tons. By August, Vietnam 2.3 million tons. These are figures that were only been dreamt about even 5 years ago. So we have a complex outlook in the market right now. We have a situation where we have the stocks at destination, improving demand, but buyers are being very cautious. And essentially, they're saying, why should we move? We'll move when everyone else does. So for a lot of buyers, especially price-conscious buyers, it's not so much important that they get the cheapest price. What's important for buyers in those situations, so let's talk about buyers in price-sensitive areas, private label, big in the United States. Private label packing done by tender, you need to be very, very efficient in your buying and on your pricing. So what's important for those buyers is not so much that they get the lowest price, but just that they get the same price or a lower price than their competitors. So there's no incentive really to buy just because prices are low, because they're low for everyone. So we'll often hear buyers say at the moment, well, why should we move? Let's wait till everyone else does. Sometimes when that happens, of course, everyone moves and the market shoots up. But there's no prospect of that at the moment, in my opinion. The other side of it is the uncertainty, the economic factors, energy prices. So we have a really complex outlook here. In many ways, the signals are that the market is becoming healthier, demand is improving, and prices should improve. But on the other side, there are enough factors right now to discourage buyers from following the market. And within the next 2 to 3 months, they'll start to say, well, you know what, we'll wait and we'll see what the crop prospects are in the Northern Hemisphere. What would change that? The weather. If we got the prospect of a poor crop, particularly in Cambodia or Vietnam, that would change everything, and the market then might turn around. But for now, it looks to me, by the way, I think kernels prices will move up, but I think that will be slow, and I think it will be step by step. So I'm optimistic for next year. And I'd like to leave you with some kind of optimism. And I picked up this article in Snacks Magazine during the week. So this is the autumn edition of Snacks Magazine. Snacks Magazine is the magazine of the European Snack Association. Covers all kinds of snack foods. Very interesting. And they have some very good articles on the long-term impact. I just picked out a few quotations from an article on demand for snacks, not specifically nuts, but snacks, including nuts. And looking at them, so they're talking about demand being resilient. They said, yeah, of course, and we know in the cashew business, it has been impacted by inflation and cost, but they expect that the volume will be regained by 2024 and growth trends will resume. So that suggests what we're seeing now in the import statistics in Europe is an indicator of what's to come next year. Secondly, and thinking a little bit more longer term, they're saying that snack makers are unperturbed by the blip. And blip is a word that means it's short term and it changes quickly. But they're unperturbed. They're not worried about this blip in nut sales in 2022, 2023. and they're looking forward to the long-term healthy eating appeal of nuts. So these factors, healthy eating, which really fits well with nuts, really fits well with cashew nuts, really significant factors as we look to the longer term. So we can remain optimistic that demand will return to strong growth in Europe and probably in North America, as it has already done in Asia. Third factor, and this is especially for all of our African processors, you need to keep focus on this. Research indicates, and this is, I think, research done by Euromonitor, that more than half of consumers in Europe are willing to pay extra for food that helps solve global issues. So that means global issues such as climate change, global issues such as the carbon footprint of an industry, labor practice, food shortages. If you're a cashew processor anywhere, but particularly if you're in an African country, you're in a great position to be part of that trend. So really optimistic news, but that doesn't mean that next week or the week after or next month we're going to see a big positive change in the market. Change will come slowly in this case, but there is a pretty positive outlook in the longer run. All right, so let me stop there and let me move to our guests. So we've got two interesting guests today, and I thank them both, and we're very pleased for them to join us. Francis Alfred is the Director General of the Cashew Nut Board of Tanzania. He's joining us to talk about the Tanzanian cashew situation. And Lucia Antonio from Mozambique is the head of the Department of Trade and Agri-Industry at the Instituto de Amendoas de Mozambique, so the Mozambique Cashew Institute. Both very welcome. I'm going to come to Francis Alfred first. Let me introduce this subject a little bit. East African producers are important. We're focusing on two countries today, Tanzania and Mozambique, the two countries that lead Southern Hemisphere production now that Brazil has receded back to much lower levels of production. These are the two leading producers at this time of year. So between October and January, we see about 14% of the world's crop harvested. More than half of that is in this region between these two countries. So really important, really interesting place to look at, especially at this time of year. Both countries still export a lot of raw cashew nuts, but both countries are coming up in processing. So let's start by talking to the Director General of the Cashew Nut Board of Tanzania, Francis Alfred. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon, Jim. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you very well. You're very welcome. It's nice to hear you and to see you at the GME. So we're talking about Tanzania. On the screen, I just put up a very quick, rough map of Tanzania and an idea of the cashew sector. But let's talk about this season. And I'd love to ask you, what is the outlook for production in the Tanzanian cashew sector this year?
This season we are expecting the crop to improve in terms of the volume of production. It will improve as compared to last year, but also the most important thing, we are having very quality material this time, very quality RCN, because of the weather being very conducive for cashew, and also been observing that harvesting has started a bit early. Most of farmers have been harvesting their cashew early, so we are expecting the initial auctions to have bigger volume brought for auction because the harvesting came early. So on the overall, there will be improvement this season on the part of production and the quality, and also for example, previous year we had planned to start the auction on 28th. But later on, we had to extend it to a later date. Maybe it was late October. This time, we planned the 28th October, and for real, we are starting on 28th October which will be Friday this week. So on overview, that's the crop situation.
So positive outlook and the auction starting on Friday. Well, that's good news.
Yeah.
What about from the growers' point of view? Are there any changes in the pricing arrangements for growers this year?
Tanzania, we do not have indicative price, and most of the time we depend on the market prices, but the farmers are expecting a higher price compared to previous season. That is their expectation. That has been linked to pigeon peas and the sesame. You know, for the past years before the cashew, they started selling pigeon peas. They said first sesame, then they sell the pigeon peas. All were on the higher price. So farmers are expecting higher prices compared to the previous season. That is the farmers' expectation on their perspective.
And so the currency, I think, is a little bit weaker than it was this time last year. So they might be expecting higher prices in shillings.
Yeah, you are right. Yeah, you are right. For example, last year we are talking an exchange rate of around the 1 USD to 2,300 Tanzanian shillings. But as we are talking now, 1 USD is equivalent to 2,509 USD per dollar. So the depreciation of the currency of Tanzanian shilling, we are expecting it to have an impact on that the farmer might get additional more, because for the same amount of USD that the buyers used yesterday, they will get more shillings when they are exchanging to Tanzanian shillings. So we expect that one will have a positive impact on the farmers to get a bit higher prices compared to the previous season.
Okay, that's good news for them, and hopefully that will encourage better plantings and an increase in the crop in the coming years. Have there been any changes in government policy in the cashew sector or in the operation of the auction for the export RCN?
For example, for export RCN, we are having the same policy like the previous year, that exporters of RCN has to buy cashew through the auctions. But for local processors, they can buy direct from the farmers using the primary market. And we are encouraging also local processors to buy also through the auction. So the government policy has been, for the next 2 to 3 years, we want to encourage more processing. So much effort we are keep putting now is to encourage processing in country, but we have not banned the processing export of raw cashew. So while we are planning to increase the production, we want to increase the amount of being processed, but at the same time, saving for those who are buying cash from Tanzania to be able to get raw materials from us. So I think that's realistic. Yeah. So the selling condition for the Maya are the same like previous year. No changes. Even the taxes and the levies are the same, which were being charged the last season. If there is a variation, maybe only in the Ghani bags, which will change a bit, about maybe for 5 to 7 shillings, because the price change in the Ghani bags. Otherwise, all other levies and taxes are the same as the previous season.
Okay.
But this time, for example, previous season, our farmers were being paid 10 days after the date of the auction. This time we want farmers to be paid 7 days after the day of the auction. So we've been guiding the cooperative unions to make sure that once the buyers pay, they should do transaction fast to make sure that farmers are paid on time. Our intention is to encourage farmers to bring more cash into auction if they get paid timely, so that they don't sell cash into informal market.
Well, that's remarkable improvement. I know that was a big issue for farmers in the past. If you can get it to 7 days, that would be fantastic, and it would change the farmer's perspective, I think.
Yeah, it's seven working days. Should be clear. 7 working days from the day of the auction.
Okay, I hope that works. That would be a great change. And how do you think we're thinking? And I've heard some very ambitious estimates of production in the future. How do you see the longer term cashew production in Tanzania? Are we going to see bigger and bigger crops over the years?
Yeah, because now we are really determined. we are really determined to increase production, especially in the new areas. You know, now we are having more than 17 regions, although up to now 90% comes from the 5 regions we have been producing from since several years ago. Those are Mtwara, Lindi, Ruvuma, Pwani, and the Tanga. But in the new regions, we are having only small crop planting. So we want to intensify planting the new regions and encourage block farming in those areas. And also now we want to intensify also the process of the program of giving seedlings free of charge to the farmers. So we are working to get financing on how we could display a lot of seedlings. So our ambitious goal of producing 1 million by 2030, we are working toward that. It's an ambitious goal, but we want to achieve that. So we'll do our best to make sure that we achieve what we are planning to achieve and increase processing in the country.
Yeah, I was very interested last year talking to people in the country about the large areas of the country that are suitable to grow cashews. It's a very large area, and it occurred to me that you could even possibly have a large sort of March-April crop as well as the September-December crop. Do you think that's likely in the future?
Yeah, the good thing that, for example, new regions, as we are talking in the middle part of the country and as we are going to the northern part, the crop in that area, including Tanga, which is close to Mombasa, those northern part, their crop begins in February. You know, for example, the southern part, the crop will start in October, and most of the crop by January, we are on the final stages. But for the central part and the other region where you are going to the north, those which are suitable for cashew, the crop starts in February and ends in May. So we are expecting once the new regions have got bigger crop production, we'll have an extended crop season. Instead of ending January, it means it will be an extended to May. For us, we find it more conducive for our local processors, so that they'll have a longer time to access raw material, unlike the situation now that they have to stock big amount of cashew during the period of October to December to process the whole year. So that's why we want to put a lot of efforts in the central part, like Singida and the Dodoma, especially those regions, so that we could attain that intention of extending our crop season in the country. Which will be beneficial for local processors, but also buyers from outside the country.
This could be a real game changer, couldn't it? I mean, I see the two things. One, the processors having access to buy in the primary market. I think that's a huge boost for processors. But if Tanzania had a crop in the September, December plus February, May, it completely changes the calculation for processors in terms of the working capital needs. And that would be a huge change, and really positive too. So I hope that comes to pass. And what about processing? I know that listening to some of the reports from the Tanzanian International Cashew Conference last week, that there is an emphasis now on processing development in the country. What's been happening? Are there projects in hand?
Yeah. For example, currently we've been having new factories, of course, for investors from Europe and mostly from Europe. About 3-4 factories have been established now, and now we are seeing other investors from India and Vietnam planning to put a processing factory here in the country. But having those isolated one by one does not bring much significant increase in the processing. So now we are working to establish an industrial park. I hope you have heard that one.
Yeah.
In Maranje in Mtwara, we are talking with Arise. Arise are the ones who are having industrial park in Benin. I hope you know them. We are in the final discussion with them to establish a Maranje industrial park, where we are planning to process more than 300,000 RCN. And also, not only RCN, but also we want to process other crops like sesame, and also assist farmers in the production of other crops. So we are looking forward for the industrial park because in that area, for those who want to, they'll be able to get the free land. And I would like to put it very clear, Jim Patrick, that we are going to work with Arise, but We are going to have our own model, not just copying from Benin or other countries. We want the industrial park to complement the efforts already on the ground, but also our intention is to, as a government, is to be able to supply, to buy raw material, and the supply for process will be there at the industrial park. But I'd like to put it clear that while we are working to establish an industrial park, but also we are going to continue supporting other processors who are outside the industrial park. And then now one of the main challenges has been raw materials. So for the coming 2 to 3 years, we are going to have an arrangement whereby we are going to consolidate cargo in some of the warehouses and sell it to process on a regular basis based on their demand. So when we assemble that industrial park, that's one of our initiatives to make sure that we create an environment whereby more processors can come in one place and they can be able to send them easily by providing raw materials and other requirements so that we can make the working environment to be even much easier for local processing in the country. So we are going to work with RIs, but we are going to have a customized arrangement whereby which one suits our need. So because people want to put investment in Tanzania should not be afraid. Maybe they know RIs, what are they doing in the other countries. I want to give confidence to them that the industrial park we are having here will be for different mode, which meets and intents would be customized based for those who will be putting processing plant in that area. So we have got an area of around 1,575 acres, and that area land will be in the ownership of the government and the CBT, Cashew Board of Tanzania, and we'll be working with RIs to make sure to make that industrial park come to reality.
That sounds really positive. I'm very interested and indeed happy to hear that you're going to take the project and adapt it to Tanzanian situation. I've been working with a processor in Mtwara a little bit, a company called Coastal Nuts, and I've got to say that some of the cashew kernels are amongst the best I have ever seen in terms of their quality, appearance, and taste. So it seems to me there's every reason for Tanzania to develop its cashew processing. And I just wanted to show some of the processor investor incentives on the screen. So Alfred shared with us this morning just some of the investor incentive schemes. And I'm just looking at them: tax incentives, facilitation services, support for investment infrastructure, and direct incentives, including the opportunity to buy through the primary market. I just picked those out. Are these all in place now?
Yeah, they are all in place now because for people who are putting processing plant in Tanzania, even though you are not in the EPZA zone, you can register and get license for EPZA zone, even though you are not in the zone. So it means you qualify for those incentives at the EPZA zone, because this is 80% of the cash now is exported. So cash processing in the country, they fit for EPZA incentives. So even if you're not in the EPZA zone, anywhere you are, you can register for EPZA zone and the benefit from those incentives under EPZA. So that's why that thing has been a great motive for investors of cashew processing in the country.
Okay, so these opportunity, these incentives, they apply to people who are in the EPZ, people who are outside the EPZ, new investors, and also existing processors.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you 80% of that product will be exported, you fit to be to qualify for EPZA incentive scheme.
Okay, it's good news, I think, for the investment in processing. I wish you every success with it. It's quite good to see some of the changes that you have made, and I hope they're rewarded with success.
Thank you.
So just to summarize, looking back, it seems to me that we're looking at a positive outlook for the crop in Tanzania this year. We're looking at a crop that started a little bit earlier than last year. It seems to be good quality material. The auctions will start this week. No doubt processors will be in the market buying from farmers too. And there is, from what we've heard this morning, a pretty positive outlook in the Tanzanian cashew sector. So, Francis Alfred, the Director General of the Cashew Nut Board of Tanzania, thank you very much.
Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Something to add? Please, feel free.
No, there was a disconnection in the network, so I couldn't hear the last words you are talking about.
I was just
1 minute ago.
Oh, okay. I was just summarizing what you've been saying and the positive outlook, and wishing you well for the season. I hope it's another successful season. But do stay with us, because we'll no doubt have some questions from our viewers at the end of the program.
I'm around. I'm not going. I'm around.
Good news. Thank you. Okay. So let's move on. Let's have a look at the situation in Mozambique, and I'm very pleased to welcome Lucia Antonio, the head of Department of Trade and Agri-Industry at IAM. Good afternoon, Lucia.
Good afternoon, Sir Jim. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you keeping?
I'm good. I'm doing fine, by grace of God.
Good to hear that. Thanks very much for joining us. It's really appreciated. You've given us some slides, so let me know when you're ready, and tell us about the situation in Mozambique this year.
Thank you very much. We can go on. Yes, brief of contextualization. Our institution was on the past called Institute of Cashew of Mozambique. Now we are called Institute of Nuts of Mozambique. And our goal is to promote the development of nuts value chain, emphasizing the cashew and macadamia, and involving more small orders, focus on inclusion. Cashew is a source of income for more than 1.4 million smallholders, and remains in our country the third main commodity in Mozambique. The cashew industry was valued at $20 million in 2022, and is projected to achieve $5 million by 2030. You can go. Next slide, please. Regarding the action to improve the cashew value chain, differently from West Africa, Tanzania and Mozambique are two countries who face pests and disease. So when we compare our production, we have to invest in pesticides and to the farmers. So when we cannot invest on that, our quality of production will be lower in our turn as well. That's why we start with a program called Production of Cashew Seedlings, and we double the production from 2011 to in last season for 6 million, included the integrated pest management. We are spraying more than 9 million cashew tree. On the market output, we are trading more than 157,000 metric tons. We are in the past we were facing with low quality of our outturn, but we are increasing from 44 libras for now. Our average is 46 libras. Regarding the export of kernel, we also increase, but slowly. When we compare to raw cashew nut export, we improve from 6,000 tons to 61,000 tons. So our major goal, or our main challenge now, is the processing. Sir Jim, you can move on. Regarding the new season upcoming new season. It's important to note that we will open the season in November 2023, no 2022. That was a mistake. And our forecast production is about 106,000 metric tons. On 2nd October, we have approved the reference price from 37 meticas, which is 0.54 US dollars per kilo. So we are lower. We have lowered the reference price in 3 cents because last season was 37 meticas, which is 0.57 US dollar per kilo. Until now, the weather conditions is overall good, but we are facing the cyclones on the last season. So we are waiting. The southern part does not be much overcoming with the cyclones and during the harvesting season. Please, Sir Jim, you can move on. This graph, it shows the evolution of production on the last 10 years. So we start with 83,000 metric tons. And last season, as I said, this was 157,000 metric tons. And now our forecast is above 106 metric tons. The trend of the price, as we can see, from 2017, we have reached peak as higher price because the international market of the raw cashew nut and kernel were good, but according with the dynamics of the markets and hearing all the expertise that we are hearing during the GMA, we have seen that the raw cashew nut kernels and raw cashew nut are not in good states. There is a lot of volatility, and this is affecting directly the national market. So our forecast, our reference price is static. It didn't increase a lot, and we have approved it during the committee of nuts, where we got together the producer, the buyers, the processors, and also the exporter. It was a heated debate, but we hope the stakeholder respect this price. You can move, Sir Jim. Here, I'm trying to share with the members of this GMA the Mozambique map, where we can see the northern part. We have 24,000 tons in Cabo Delgado. Cabo Delgado province is the province which starts at the beginning, and then we have Nampula province, which is the major producer with 80,000 tons. I'm not going to read the lower production we will find in the southern part, which is Maputo with 500 tons. So this graph is to show the distribution of our cashew commercialization along the upcoming season. You can move. And in Mozambique, we have a different harvest season. We started the northern parts. We have the Cabo Delgado province is the neighbor of Tanzania. So they start with harvest in October and finish in February. And then we have the small province, which is Niassa, start in November until February.
Lucia, we seem to have lost you. Can you hear us? I guess she's having a problem, perhaps with the microphone or with the connection. And what you can see on the screen is just the description of the harvest periods. I'll just continue looking and talking about the slides a little bit until Lucia reconnects. So what you're seeing on the screen is the fact that the main producing provinces in Mozambique in the north, Cabo Delgado and Nampula, we saw that Nampula is the largest producing area, that the harvest there is November and it goes through until March. And then in the lesser producing areas, you can see on the screen which months. So this is why the season starts in November. And we will see this year how that works with the slightly lower price. There was one thing I wanted to mention. It just occurred to me as we looked at price. So although the price now at 35 Mitakai is lower than last year, if we go back 10 years, it is almost 3 times the price of 10 years ago. Sometimes when we look at volatility in the raw cashew nut market, after a period of high prices, we see prices having collapsed. But in reality, the general trend is for higher prices for farmers. And I think that's true in Tanzania, it's true in Mozambique, and it's true in West Africa too. So we're still waiting for Lucia to join us. Let me talk a little bit about her next slide, just in case she doesn't come back to us in time. So the sector in Mozambique is highly supported, and there are some important laws around that support. They've increased the export tax, which was at 18%, which is quite high. They're increasing that to 22%. That, I presume, will act as an incentive for processing and will protect processors to a certain extent. I also see that they're introducing an export tax on former kernels, the unpeeled kernels, at 15% ad valorem. That's quite an interesting idea. Mozambique has become a significant exporter of kernels to Vietnam for the processing. And that taxation might act as an incentive, as an assistance to processors to complete the process. And as you can see, the export tax, as it's collected, is allocated to support production, 70%, 20% to support the industry processing, and the balance to support research and development, which of course is highly important. Processors, in the event of a shortage of raw cashew nuts, can import raw cashew nuts legally and above board. I presume they could buy those in Tanzania, if that made sense, buy them at the auction through a Tanzanian exporter and bring them to Mozambique above board, which might be interesting in the future. Let me see if Lucia, I guess, has a problem. Yeah, I'm not hearing from her. So look, it's been interesting information that she has provided us. I'm sorry that we lost her. That is a shame. But you can see some of this information, and we will be circulating the slides. The slides will be available, and indeed the video will be available on the African Cashew Alliance YouTube channel in the course of the week. Yes.
Hello, Jim.
Yes, Blessing.
Lucia is reconnecting.
She's reconnecting.
So she'll join us shortly, yes.
Okay, well, let me allow her to go back to where she left off. But it is interesting, isn't it, that we're seeing developments in Tanzania and in Mozambique that are favoring the development of supporting increases in production. And Tanzania has a long history of cashew research. and Mozambique is developing the same. There's all kinds of noise on my line. I'm not sure if you're hearing that. If you are, I apologize. I'm not sure what it is. Okay, so let's go on. Let's go to Blessing then in the meantime. Lucia is trying to connect. When she does, we'll go back to her. Thank you on her behalf for the time being for your interest in these slides and for listening. Let's go now to Blessing, and while we wait for Lucia, let's see, are there any questions, Blessing?
Yes, Tim, there are some questions here, and I'd also like to inform our audience, if you would like to interact directly with Jim or any of the guests, please do let us know by using the raise your hand feature, and then we would allow you to interact directly with any of the guests or Jim. So the first question here is, why is it almost every time cashew demand increases, prices don't increase?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. It really is a good question. Well, I think that's been a very recent phenomenon. So there's a couple of things in play. There is a time lag, first of all. So a lot of buyers in markets are covered. So a lot of processors have bought the raw cashew nuts they need. A lot of buyers, distributors, roasters will have bought the cashews they need. And there is a time lag, first of all, on when they need to come to the market. So demand might increase, but it takes a while for that to follow through into the market. Now we see that both when prices go up and when prices go down. So what we're seeing now is the time lag in the increase in demand following lower prices. And that's for lots of reasons. The kind of comments that we've been making, the kind of issues that we've been talking about, economic, demand-wise, distribution, costs, inflation, all of those factors. So in some markets, you see a pretty quick reaction when demand changes. So perhaps in markets of the Middle East or in China. And that's because in those markets, people generally don't buy forward. But in markets in Europe and the United States, and in the raw cashew nut market, people tend to have bought their stock or they've bought forward. And in those circumstances, it takes them a little bit longer to react. So the increases in demand at consumer level, the increases in imports take a while to follow through. So I think that it's a good point, and I think it's just the structure of the market. I think if we had a situation where the market was more integrated, where there was more processing at origin or close to consumption, then we would see a fact of reaction. We're waiting now to see a change in the sentiment, a change in the behavior of buyers to match the change that we've seen in the statistics and in the import numbers. So it's a great question. We could talk about that one all day long, and I've often wondered about it. But I'll leave it at that for now. Blessing.
Thank you very much, Tim. The next question goes like this. I have concerns about stocks and controversial policies from some production countries towards calling industrialization of African cashews and more processing, less RCN selling. Is it that there is no equilibrium in the market, no clear reason to support it?
I'm not okay. Let me answer the question insofar as I understand that question. So first of all, there is no equilibrium in the market at the moment because that's what we used to call parity between raw cashew nuts, which means can you buy raw cashew nuts today, process them and sell them and make a profit? And make a reasonable profit that sustains your business. And right now, that's really difficult. Now, is that due to policies in African countries? Not really. I don't really think so. I think it's more or less due to the low prices of kernels. And the disjoint, in my opinion, the disjoint between kernels prices and raw cashew nut prices right now is really down to a reaction of demand to inflation and perhaps a certain overreaction to that. It is a great concern that at a time when shipments are positive, when demand looks to be on the rise, that processors are still struggling. And I think that in the longer run, we have to face the fact that the trade in raw cashew nuts, will it be 3.5, 4, 5, 6 million tons? That's just unsustainable. And I think that as that becomes unsustainable, it is important and necessary that African countries develop processing. But I don't think that they will be at 100% processing or anywhere like that in the immediate future. There will be adequate supplies of raw cashew nuts for consumers in India and processors in Vietnam. But the market does need to integrate, because if it doesn't integrate, if it doesn't develop according to the trends amongst consumers, it just will not be sustainable and it will not continue. So we need to think long term. Some of the policies, I completely agree, are difficult to understand. Some of the more interventionist policies tend to have unintended consequences. Some of those consequences are bad news. But what's going on is a period of change and a period of development. And we do need to follow that very closely. Inevitably, there will be mistakes made. But inevitably, I feel that the strength of demand, like we've spoken about in terms of that article from the Snacks magazine, that the strength of demand and consumer trends worldwide, and worldwide consumers are tending toward healthy food, they're tending toward sustainable food, that this will influence the market, increase origin processing. So you can see a time, in my mind, when African processing will have grown. Processing in Vietnam will be successful and will continue, there's no doubt about that. But perhaps the focus on markets might be a little bit different. Vietnam might be focused on higher value addition. It might be focused on Asian markets, so that the raw cashew nuts move toward the market rather than moving away from the market and then moving back to it. And I think that's the trend that we're on, and that's the changes that are coming about. So, blessing, I saw Lucia joined us there for a moment, but it appears that she's lost her connection again.
Okay, she should be back in few seconds, but while we're waiting for her, I have two questions for Alfred. Alfred, are you still with us? Hello, Alfred?
Hello, I can hear you. I'm around.
Okay, I have two questions addressed to you. The first one is, what's the new crop projection for Tanzania?
Projection?
Yes.
Projection will be not less than 300,000.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question, someone is asking that you elaborate the auction process.
Okay. Okay, for the auctioning process, normally for those buyers who want to come to buy cashew, they register with Cashew Nut Board of Tanzania, and it's an online registration. And normally now they need to have a local company, but registering a company also is online, it's not an issue. So a buyer comes in, register a company, a local company, and register in an online system called ATMIS. After registering, normally depending on the quantity he wants to buy, we require him to put a security bond. It's like a amount of cash which is put. The intention of putting that bond is we want only those buyers who are serious to go to the auction. Because previously there have been cases where those who are not serious buyers going to the auction, winning a bid and failing to pay for cashew. So they put a security bond depending on the amount they want to buy. After that one, they will already have been registered. Now, the system we are using now is the auction using the box. We are still using the box. Went to online, but there are some issues with most farmers couldn't understand it. So we are continuing the trend. We are continuing the education to farmers. So it's a box system whereby they put normally one day before the auction, they will get the catalog. Catalog is a paper showing the quality of cashew in terms of moisture content, number of nuts per kilogram, and the LBS pounds, and where cashew is in which warehouse. So after receiving that catalog, then the buyer will decide which warehouse to buy, and he will put his bid in a box. So the next day, that box will be opened in front of the farmers, and the bidder with the highest price for that particular warehouses will be a winner for that cashew. And after winning that auction, normally the buyer is supposed to pay within 4 working days. Later on, he can collect the cashew in the main warehouse. And because he have made decision based on the catalog, which is a paper, before collecting cashew in the warehouse, he is supposed to check the quality of that cashew to if it matches what was stated in the catalog. If it's okay, it's when he collects his cashew. If there is any problem, he reports that to Cashew Nut Board of Tanzania, they will take charge to rectify the situation. So in brief, that's the situation. However, if they need more details, I'll share with Jim Patrick some of the rules and guidelines for this season, the major one, which Fitzpatrick can share with some of the stakeholders here so they understand. And for more details, you have my number, so we can share also with those who want to share, to talk with me or to communicate with me on further details on how they could. But to make it simple, that any new entrant can come and buy cashew in Tanzania. There is no any complication. Some people are afraid to come straight to buy cashew in Tanzania. Let me tell you, it's very simple to come to Tanzania and buy cashew. And in case you face any difficulties, Cashew Nut Board of Tanzania, we are there to support you. So I encourage any buyers from India, Vietnam, and other places who want to come to buy cashew, they are warmly welcome, and they will support them.
Thank you very much, Alfred. Jim, we have Lucia back online. She may continue with her presentation.
Okay, that's good news. Let me, I think this is where you left off, Lucia. Would you like to continue?
Thank you very much, and I apologize. We have a fluctuation in Mozambique. Is raining season, so we have struggled with electricity. So I was sharing about the harvest season in Mozambique, and you can go on, Jim. So we have approved recently the new cashew law. The number is 9/2023 on 20 July. And the main goal of this cashew law is set up to stimulate suitable environment for cashew business actors along the cashew value chain. And we have the innovative aspect to protect the processing. We increased raw cashew nut levy from 18% to 22%. We introduced export tax on unpeeled kernel for 50%. We have zero tax on kernel export. We import tax. The import tax on kernels is 10 to 20%. With export tax, we use the value to allocate to production with 7%. As we are sharing at the beginning, we need to invest on research to find new varieties and clones to improve productivity and production. So we allocated 10%. And for support the industry with the guarantee fund, we allocate 20%. It was 10%. And we have zero tax on raw cashew nut import for industry. And the processors are also authorized to import raw cashew nut to Mozambique because our cashew season is short in the northern part, and the processor has to buy raw cashew nut material to process along the year. So when the market doesn't have the processor, they are allowed also to import raw cashew nut. So that the innovative aspect on the new cashew law reform. You can continue, sir, Jim. So that ends my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Really interesting. I'm I'm interested in a couple of factors there, just looking at the policy reform. The introduction of a tax on unpeeled or Burma kernels. Is that introduced as a support to processors, or what's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, this is also to support the processor, because we are observing the movement of processor, normally foreigner processor. They tend to export Burma kernels, and on those factories, the number of employees are lower. So the major benefits of processing industry is to increase employees in rural areas. So what we are observing is some companies are exporting Burma kernels, and the number of employees are decreasing. And to introduce that tax, we have we have had a long conversation with all stakeholders to come into agreement what Mozambique should do to not to prevent, but to reduce the trend of processing Burma kernel instead of final processing and aggregated value in our country. So we come with this agreement with 50%, and all the traders and the processor and exporter agree with this tax levy.
Okay, I think it's a really interesting innovation in policy. Lucia, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. It really is interesting.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Let's go back to Blessing then and see if there are any more questions.
Thank you very much, Jim. Yes, there are more questions. Maybe we start with Lucia before we go to the others addressed to you, Jim. Lucia, someone wants to know, someone is asking that you elaborate more on the export tax value allocation.
Thank you very much. The export value allocation is the result of export of tax of raw cashew nut. With those values, we have to reinvest on cashew value chain. And we have prioritized research, we have prioritized production, because our production and productivity is not trending in comparison has the Ivory Coast. So we need to invest in commercial plantation. We need to invest in increases production and productivity, and also the quality. We need to start expanding to semi-arid region, and to do that work, we need to reallocate money. So we are talking about pests and disease in our cashew value chain, and it's very important to invest on research and laboratories so that we can develop new plants and variety. Apart from industry, this is also to support the increase of processing, because we know that the financial issue are the main struggling of the industrial, especially in Africa country, and Mozambique is not going to be different. So with all this tax value that we gain after exporting the raw cashew nut, we reinvest in all cashew value chain to benefit all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Jim, I have some questions. Okay, just before we go to before I address the questions to you, Jim, Lisa, there's another question here. What's the highest outturn produced by Mozambique recently?
The outturn, the highest one is 50 libers, and the lowest one is 44 libers. So the average is 46 now, and we hope to increase, because we are training the producer in good harvesting and conservation, and also the determination of the outturn to increase the quality of our raw cashew nut. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucia. Jim, these questions are addressed to you. The first one, what are the factors that prevent African countries from processing their own RCN and rather export them?
Well, there's a lot of factors. Availability of investment funds, availability of expertise. In the past, incentives from the government. In the past, access to technology, but that's changing. We are seeing now a major increase in processing in many countries, and we're seeing, as we've heard in Tanzania and in Mozambique, incentives introduced. So it seems now that the pattern is changing. This is probably the fourth wave of processing in African countries, and to me it now seems to have fundamentally and irreversibly changed, so that we're seeing the development of processing. So these issues, technical expertise, access to investment capital, marketing expertise, management expertise, links between processors and farmers, initial support for processing, and that ranges from export taxes, for example, as we've heard, in some countries, favorable investment climates, in others, the development of industrial parks, like we've heard this morning for Tanzania, and in other countries, even subsidies for processing, like in Cote d'Ivoire. So there is an effort to overcome the difficulties, and it looks to me as if it's going to be successful this time round. Blessing.
Thank you, Jim. Lucia, there is a need for clarification here. Do you mean zero tax on RCN that's imported into Mozambique from other countries?
Processors are authorized to import raw cashew nut. This is a zero tax on raw cashew nut import for industry. Yes, the processors has to clarify, and we have to do all the logistic accountability to see if they are importing to process or to use in another. Because if they are importing for processing and there is no in locally raw cashew nut, it's going to be zero tax on imports.
Thank you very much, Lucia. Jim, back to you. What should we be expecting from now till the next CME? What should we be looking out for?
Well, I don't think we're going to see any period of particular volatility in the next 2 weeks. I'd be looking out for continued demand. I'm not expecting that you're going to see any big change in demand, but I think it will remain positive. I'd be keeping a close eye on weather. It's not critical yet, but I'd be keeping a close eye on weather in Southeast Asia, particularly the potential impact of El Nino on the crops. I'd be looking to see if there is a consolidation in prices of kernels. I don't really expect much movement in kernels prices, but you may see some small upward clicks. And of course, keep an eye on what's happening in the auction in Tanzania starting on Friday. It'll be very interesting to see the level of interest, look for buyers, of course, from India, but also to see if Vietnamese buyers are going to partake in the early stage auctions. I would also, now that we're into the new crop season in East Africa, if you're a buyer of kernels, talk to processors in Tanzania, talk to processors in Mozambique, see what they can do on kernels for the coming season. Blessing.
Thank you very much, Jim. And for the next GME, we are expecting to have a discussion on the Brazilian cashew sector. Could you please throw more light to that, or what we should be looking out for?
Yeah, well, next time we're going to have a discussion on Brazil. Things have changed over the years quite a lot in Brazil. Brazil was a big grower of cashews at one time. 450,000 tons, I think, was the peak, maybe a little more than that. Today, the crop is much lower, but Brazil is still an important factor in the market. Brazil is a supplier and exporter of cashew kernels, a small importer of raw cashew nuts from time to time. But also, Brazil is a huge country and there is a very interesting market for nuts in Brazil. So we're going to talk about a few of those issues the next time. We're also going to talk about the market, and we're going to talk about what happens in the coming 2 weeks. So I'm looking forward to that. Blessing.
Thank you very much, Jim. That'll be all the questions. You may take concluding remarks from the guests and we'll wrap up the session.
Well, I would just like to thank our two guests from Tanzania, Francis Alfred, from the Director General of the Cashew Board of Tanzania, and from Mozambique, Lucia Antonio from IAM, the head of the Trade and Agribusiness Department there. Thank you very much to both of you for your contributions. It's really valuable. It's really appreciated by people in the cashew sector. Keep up the good work. From my side, I'll just say thank you very much indeed. You can see my contacts on the screen, or feel free to contact me through the African Cashew Alliance. Always happy to talk cashews. So thanks very much indeed. All the best for now. Talk to you in 2 weeks. Take care.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, we have come to the end of another session of the ACA Global Market Encounter with Jim Fitzpatrick. And once again, on behalf of the ACA Board and Management, we appreciate our partners and sponsors who have continually made it possible for us to bring these sessions to you. And of course, our gratitude also to our two guests who joined us today, Alfred and Lucia. I'd like to invite all of us to the third edition of the Sahelian Cashew Forum, FOCAS, which will be held in Bobo-Dioulasso, Burkina Faso. And the date is 7th to the 9th of November in Burkina Faso. Invitation to the Sahelian Cashew Forum. This event is free, and we ask that you join us from the 7th to the 8th to the 9th of November in Bobo-Dioulasso. And the venue is La Maison de la Culture de Bobo-Dioulasso, Burkina Faso. And as Jean mentioned, we would be happy to have you join us again on the 1st of November. That is in 2 weeks for another session of the Global Markets Encounter. And until then, we ask that you stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucia.